Good morning. The need for international solidarity and multilateral cooperation is more conspicuous than ever. The Norwegian Nobel Committee has decided to award the Nobel Peace Prize for 2020 to the World Food Programme for its efforts to combat hunger, for its contribution to bettering conditions for peace in conflict-affected areas, and for acting as a driving force in efforts to prevent the use of hunger as a weapon of war and conflict. The World Food Programme is the world's largest humanitarian organization addressing hunger and promoting food security. Last year, the WFP provided assistance to close to 1 million people in 88 countries who are victims of acute food insecurity and hunger. In 2015, eradicating hunger was adopted as one of UN's Sustainable Development Goals. The WFP is the UN's primary instrument for realizing this goal. In recent years, the situation has taken a negative turn. In 2019, 135 million people suffered from acute hunger, the highest number in many years. Most of the increase was caused by war and armed conflict. The coronavirus pandemic has contributed to a strong upsurge in the number of victims of hunger in the world. In countries such as Yemen, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Nigeria, South Sudan, and Burkina Faso, the combination of violent conflict and the pandemic has led to a dramatic rise in the number of people living on the brink of starvation. In the face of the pandemic, the World Food Programme has demonstrated an impressive ability to intensify its efforts. As the organization itself has stated, until the day we have a vaccine, food is the best vaccine against chaos. The world is in danger of experiencing a hunger crisis of inconceivable proportions if the World Food Programme and other food assistance organizations do not receive the financial support they have requested. The link between hunger and armed conflict is a vicious circle. War and conflict can cause food insecurity and hunger, just as hunger and food insecurity can cause latent conflicts to flare up and trigger the use of violence. We will never achieve the goal of zero hunger unless we also put an end to war and armed conflict. The Norwegian Nobel Committee wishes to emphasize that providing assistance to increase food security not only prevents hunger, but can also help to improve prospects for stability and peace. The World Food Programme has taken the lead in combining humanitarian work with peace efforts through pioneering projects in South America, Africa, and Asia. The World Food Programme was an active participant in the diplomatic process that culminated in May 2018 in the UN Security Council's unanimous adoption of Resolution 2417, which, for the first time, explicitly addresses the link between conflict and hunger. The Security Council also underscored UN member states' obligation to help ensure that food assistance reaches those in need and condemned the use of starvation as a method of warfare. With this year's award, the Norwegian Nobel Committee wishes to turn the eyes of the world towards the millions of people who suffer from or face the threat of hunger. The World Food Programme plays a key role in multilateral cooperation on making food security an instrument of peace and has made a strong contribution towards mobilizing UN member states to combat the use of hunger as a weapon of war and conflict. The organization contributes daily to advancing the fraternity of nations referred to in Alfred Nobel's will. As the UN's largest specialized agency, the World Food Programme is a modern version of the peace congresses that the Nobel Peace Prize is intended to promote. The World Food Programme, the work of the World Food Programme to the benefit of humankind is an endeavor that all nations of the world should be able to endorse and support. Thank you very much. Kan jeg få krykkene? Jeg blir stående.
Madam Leader of the Committee, in the announcement you say that hunger is often used as a weapon in conflicts. Explain how.
Well, I think it's one of the oldest conflict weapons in the world, that you can starve out a population to enter a territory. Parties in a conflict, if you get control over the food, you get also a military control and you get a better control of civilians. You can also use food insecurity as a method to chase populations away from their territory by burning down farms, destroying infrastructure, etc. So I think throughout all times, and unfortunately also in present day, this is a very active weapon in warfare.
And you also make a point that the World Food Programme is in great need of economical support. Do you think that this prize will be like an eye-opener and make it easier for the international community to contribute economically in a better way?
This is our sincere hope, because there is a connection of the increased hunger or the starving populations of the world today and the pandemic. There is an estimate of the World Food Programme that, given the budgets they have today, there will be about 265 million starving people within a year. So, of course, this is also a call to the international community not to underfund the World Food Programme. This is an obligation in our minds of all states of the world to ensure that people are not starving.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, how important is the corona pandemic for this year's Peace Prize?
The World Food Programme would have been a worthy recipient of the Nobel Peace Prize without the pandemic. But the pandemic and the challenges raised by the pandemic definitely strengthens the reasons for the prize. First of all, the pandemic has increased the need for food aid. And food aid is not always only edible foods. It's also protective measures, it's investments in local farmings. Some indigenous people have self-isolated themselves to protect themselves from the virus and cannot feed themselves. So that is definitely one point. Food is less available to some populations because of the virus. But the pandemic also shows us another very important factor, that multilateral cooperation is absolutely necessary to combat global challenges. And multilateralism seems to have a lack of respect these days. And the Nobel Committee definitely wants to emphasize this aspect, and it is a very important UN organization. And as the Nobel Committee sees it, UN plays a key role in upholding the humanitarian standards of the world, human rights, and multilateral cooperation on a large scale.
To what extent does food provide peace?
Well, lack of food definitely provides conflict, because there's a fight for resources is probably one of the most common reasons for conflict. Lack of food also provides instability in the population, naturally, because food is one of our most basic needs. And as I just recently mentioned, food is also used as a weapon. So, of course, lack of food increases conflict.
Anna Gestal, NTB.
Please speak up a bit. I know it's difficult with a mask.
Anna Gestal from NTB. What do you hope this prize will inspire to and lead to a little bit more specifically?
Well, first of all, we hope that this prize raises an awareness to all the starving populations in the world, particularly us who live safely in Western communities. We do not see hunger. We have not experienced hunger. And it is also absolutely necessary to have this awareness to raise the understanding that all the world communities have to contribute to combat hunger. And that's also a question of hard cash. All nations who are able will have to contribute to solve this problem. And it's not only providing foods, it's about creating sustainable communities where the food production is exactly sustainable and can support its people. And it's also, if food is the reason for war and conflict, creating food-secure communities also creates safer communities with lesser, who are less prone to conflict.
Thank you.
As you know, there has been, as every year, a lot of speculations. And during this time of a pandemic, do you think that also this prize becomes even more important because the whole world is in a crisis we never experienced before, or at least not since the Second World War?
Definitely, and the pandemic shows that we are facing a major crisis where we all are, to a certain extent, in the same boat. There's no nation exempted from this crisis, but it is also a fact that the crisis hits communities, nations who have an unstable infrastructure, have food instability much harder than it hits other communities. But there is definitely a side to this prize that global problems will have to be solved by global efforts, and international organizations taking a global responsibility are more important than ever.
Do you also feel sure about the fact that this is probably a prize that would not be any provocation to anyone?
I cannot see why addressing the fact that people are starving, how can that be provocative?
No, I'm saying it will not be a provocation to anyone. Yeah.
I hope not.
Thank you.
You are saying that international cooperation has difficult times. Can you elaborate on the situation on the international scene as you see it?
Well, I think when you follow international debate and discourse, it's definitely a tendency that international institutions seems to be discredited more than, let's say, 20 years ago. It is part of populism, that it has nationalistic flavor, a will to everybody, every nation supporting their own interests. But when UN was founded, it was exactly with a great emphasis on the universalism in the world, the idea about universal human rights, that has consequences, that there also is a universal responsibility for the conditions of human mankind.
Who is discrediting international institutions? Is it themselves or is it outsiders?
I think if you ask anybody within the UN system, that they will claim that it is harder these days to get the necessary financial support for the different activities of the different agencies. So it is, of course, an element of not having such a strong state support as has been the fact earlier. If you in your question also imply, is the performance of international organizations so poor that they don't have the sufficient standing to gain support? I definitely cannot see that element when it comes to the World Food Programme. The World Food Programme has had the ability to enter territories that are extremely difficult to enter, like Syria, like North Korea. There's several examples, and not to mention Yemen, that is a very challenging situation presently. So I would say the organization performs on a very high level, and that is also one of the reasons they have been awarded with this prestigious prize. But it is evidently a fact that the organization is dependent on funding to carry out its task.